Hello, I'm Glenn Darling from IBM, and I'd like to show you IBM Edge Computing for Devices based upon the Horizon software. And I'd like to show two different ways of using this software to deploy software onto individual Edge machines. So the first method is called the deployment pattern approach. And I have a pattern.json file here that is called example pattern. And it is going to deploy a little example service that contains a single Docker container, and it's called IBM Hello World. And to kick things off here, I'm going to publish this in the local Horizon Exchange to make it available. And then I'm going to prepare to register some nodes using this. Well, one node using this. Of course, you could register any number of nodes. But I have an input file here. And that example program, or example service, the IBM Hello World, it takes a configuration variable called HW_who. And I'm going to set the value of that variable to pattern consumer when I register this Edge node. Okay, so let's register. And that just takes a moment. And then at the end here, it says use HCN agreement list. So we're going to use the standard Linux utility called watch to repeatedly run the HCN agreement list command over and over again to watch for what is going to happen with agreements. So what has happened is an agbot has found this agent on this node, and it has proposed an agreement. And now the agent has accepted the agreement. And in a moment, it will actually start execution. So it's going to download the Docker container for the service, and it's going to start running software. So we should see there's the IBM Hello World running here, and on this ARM device, a Raspberry Pi. And I can also do this tail command to look at syslog and watch the output. So here's hello pattern customer, hello pattern customer. So it took that input for the input variable that I provided. Okay, so that is one way of doing things. And I'm going to unregister this Raspberry Pi. And while that's taking place, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the other mechanism, which is the policy mechanism. Policy is a little bit more flexible, where a pattern, only a single deployment pattern can be registered for any particular node, and that defines the set of software that will run on that node. You can modify the pattern in the cloud and have the node pick up the new version of the pattern, but a single pattern can run on a node. With policy, you specify a policy on the node that states attributes of this node and provides any constraints that the node wants to express regarding the software that it can run. And I'm going to show you the node policy that I'm going to apply to this node. I'm going to say that the model of this node is a Glen-O-Matic, and the serial number is 7 million and change. So I'm going to go ahead and register with that. And that'll just, again, take just a few seconds to put an entry into the Horizon Exchange so that this node can be discovered by the agbots. Now, we could go ahead and run this HCN agreement list command like we did before, but nothing's going to happen now because there's no corresponding business policy that is going to drive software down to a node that has an appropriately matching node policy. So we've established the node policy. Now we need to get to work on the business policy. And I've set up a little business policy here. And like the node policy, it has properties and constraints, and we'll talk about those in a second, but it also specifies a service. So it's this service that it's going to run, and hopefully that looks familiar to you. It's exactly the same service containers that'll be run for that. And also, there's user input, which looks very similar to the user input that I provided when we used the pattern approach, except I've set the HW_who variable to policy customer this time around. Now let's take a look at the core pieces of policy. All of the different policy files specify properties and constraints, among other things. So there are no properties being specified here for this business policy, but there are two constraints. So both of these constraints have to be satisfied, or the software that was specified, this service here, will not be run on any node that does not satisfy both of these constraints. So if the model was not equal to Glenomatic, or a serial number did not fall in these two ranges, must be less than 5 million or greater than 7 million. If either one of those constraints was not satisfied, then the software would not be run on the node. So I constructed that node policy so that it'll match this. So once I establish this business policy, we should see some action. Okay, so now let's go back to run that watch command that I ran before, and we'll watch agreement list and wait for something to happen. And like before with the deployment pattern approach, typically it only takes a few seconds to perhaps a minute for an agreement bot to notice that this node is in the exchange with an appropriately matching node policy, and to reach out to it and propose an agreement. So there we are. It has reached out. There's an agreement proposal, and it may actually be occurring faster than this because this command is set to only check every 2 seconds. But now we're at the execution start time again, so let's get out of here and go back to Docker PS. And there's our IBM Hello World up and running again, and let's take a look at the output again. Okay, so now it's saying hello policy customer instead of hello pattern customer. Now, just to make things interesting, let's modify the business policy. So let's change one of these constraints here. So let's say that it has to be less than 5 million or greater than 9 million, let's say. So now the node that I've configured does not match this policy anymore. So I'm going to apply this business policy, and then I'm going to watch Docker PS and see what happens. So that's the software that we've got running there. But as soon as the agent and Aggbot realize that these two are no longer compatible, they'll terminate their agreement, and shortly thereafter the local agent will stop any containers that were corresponding to that agreement as well. So there we go. That Docker container is no longer running, and we no longer have an agreement either. If I went to watch HCN agreement list, there would be no agreement there either, and none would be forthcoming until we change that policy back again. So that is that. The two different techniques for deploying software and updating software automatically with these autonomous agents in Horizon inside IBM Edge Computing for Devices.